Hello, I'm Dr. David Pendergrass. Here's another video of someone who used to be a Christian, and now he is not. And now he has a list of he says, dumb things Christians say to atheists. And I thought I would just make some comments. I've seen about 26 seconds of this, so come along with me to see what happens. But I have it sped up a little bit because that's what we do to help save some time. So he's not, I'm not trying to make him sound foolish. He does talk very quickly, even faster than me, but that's because it's sped up. So here we go.
Dive into this tier list, I encourage you to smash that like button and subscribe to my channel, which is all about my journey as a former evangelical Christian missionary kid deconstructing years of religious baggage. Come along.
Now, that's really intriguing. So someone tells me what they're going to explore. It's to get off of years of baggage. So we know right off the bat, this is not some objective, open-minded look at something. This is a profoundly tendentious thing, which is, it's fine. But immediately, though, this is not going to be a very thoughtful approach to something.
And let's explore together how the world actually works using our trustworthy tools of scientific skepticism and critical thinking. Now let's rank some unconvincing
That kind of sarcasm, that doesn't help much with anybody in the discussion, does it?
Christian one-line singers. Number 1, you're an atheist, so you don't believe in anything. This one baffles me. What a peculiar misunderstanding about atheism. Do you believe in God?
He believes in nothing. He believes in nothing, Lebowski, nothing.
Gravity?
He believes in nothing.
The existence of anything?
He believes in nothing, Lebowski, nothing.
Apparently, being an atheist means that you have to be in a constant state of unknowable horror. But I believe in a lot of things. I believe in love, kindness, and compassion. I believe humanity can come together to overcome tremendous challenges, that human hands solve human problems, and that we should do what we can to minimize suffering and create a world of abundance where everyone can thrive. I believe that we can learn how the universe works and answer questions about our past, and that the scientific method is our best way of doing it. I believe all of this and so much more, but I'm gonna put this one in B tier just because I don't really find it all that annoying. It just...
Yeah, okay, so a lot of things there are interesting. So if a person does say that to a person, yeah, you're an atheist, you don't believe in anything, I mean, that is silly. That's silly. Atheism is, which you might bring up later on. Technically, atheism, of course, means the belief that God does not exist. The last decade, and I've said 100 times on my videos and podcasts, now they say it means I don't believe in God. Fine, I disagree with their definition completely. And anyway, the point is, this view that atheists don't believe in anything is silly. That's not atheism, any kind of textbook. But notice what he did say there, follow up, which is typical in atheists too. I also believe in caring and compassion, getting along with people, and so forth. And we can do all of that if we'll just follow the scientific method. This is called logical positivism. This is popular in the early 20th century, 1920s and 30s. It was generally considered an abject failure. And so it's reared its ugly head. It's never really died off really, but it really got popular with Richard Dawkins and people like him in the last few decades. And now we call it not logical positivism, we call it scientism on a popular level. And that's the assumption that if I can use the scientific method to demonstrate anything that is true or really exists. Now, the reason why it's demonstrably nonsense and why it's rejected so long early on is because it's self-refuting. So I'm going to ask, I think his name is Austin. Austin, what scientific apparatus did you use to discover what's beautiful? What scientific apparatus or tool, what conclusion, what paper did you read to come to the conclusion that we ought to have compassion? Not that having compassion helps the species survive, but that we ought to do it, that it's the morally right thing to do. Even if you say it helps the species survive, who gives a rip if I just need to survive? The point is you're doing a very common thing that people do when you start rejecting God is you reject moral grounding. If you don't have a ground upon which to base the moral objectives, right and wrong, then everything else you say is completely... well, it's pointless. You're just an evolved chimp on a speck of dust. And so you can believe that compassion is good. You can believe that we ought to explore the universe. You can believe that. But you didn't use the scientific method to get to that. You believe it from something other different reasons. These are called philosophy. And that's why we have a whole division of thought called philosophy of science. And philosophers of science explore and study what you just said, but they wouldn't say that. I'm not being mean about it, but that's a really elementary mistake in that. So the scientific method didn't get you to that point. But I know there's an emotional drive, right, to say, I can be good without God. That's the real deep drive, from my experience, of most atheists when they reject particularly the Christian faith. It's a way of saying, you're not better than me, ever. I'm good without you and without God and without the church. And there's an emotional drive there that's not predicated upon thinking critically about the scientific method and what it can and cannot do. This is why I wrote A Skeptic Challenges a Christian on Amazon.com. It covers all the main reasons why I think Christianity is true. This book will help you answer questions you've had for a long time. But something that's different about this book is the way it's written. I wrote this book to read like a pretend conversation, because it is like a pretend conversation. Like if you eavesdrop on a conversation between me and a skeptic, and the skeptic just drills me with questions over and over. Why do you believe that? Why do you believe that? Why do you believe that? And that's how I wrote this. So it reads like a dialogue. It doesn't read like a normal book, and it's more fast-paced, and I think it's more entertaining. This book is perfect for individual studies and for small groups. So get yours today on Kindle or paperback or an audiobook.
Mao, Stalin, and Pol Pot were atheists. I honestly can't tell you how many times I've heard Christians use this singer, as if Christians fear that atheism is a gateway drug to genocide. And it's true. Like, first thing you know, I was buying into the Big Bang, and the next thing you know, now, sure, a few horrible dictators were atheists, but are those literally the only atheists you know? Because there have been countless millions of kind, philanthropic, loving, talented, innovative, wonderful atheists and agnostics just in the last century, many of whom you probably didn't even realize were atheists, most likely including some of your family, coworkers, neighbors, and friends. Most of us just aren't public or vocal about it. Sure, there are terrible, horrible, awful atheists too, since atheism says nothing about your moral, philosophical, or political beliefs. But atheism clearly doesn't cause violent atrocities, nor does religion prevent it. Remember that almost every war, massacre, genocide, inquisition, enslavement, and other atrocity committed before the 20th century was enacted by a religious person. The only difference with the handful of more recent atheist dictators is not that they were more cruel or less moral, but rather that they had the tools and technology to perform such atrocities at scale. If you're going to judge an entire group of people by its worst members, you might want to examine the skeletons in your religion's closet first.
Yeah, there's some truth in the last part. The last part about, as far as my perspective, we should not decide whether a whole movement is evil or good based on particular constituent members of that group. The issue that he didn't deal with at all, the reason why Mao, Stalin, Pol Pot are atheists. Okay, sorry. I certainly can't speak for all people, but it is common for people to make this argument. Maybe they are just trying to slander by name association. Maybe so, that's right. But the reason why other thoughtful people mention those names is not because we think they were exceptionally bad just because they're atheists, but rather there was no moral constraint not to do it. There was no moral restraint, no moral constraint, meaning if there is no objective moral good, no objective moral value in humanity, there's no reason why we ought not do that. And that's the whole point. It's not that all atheists do nothing but bad things. It's atheists have no reason to do the good. You might say, well, no, because we know you ought to. You know you ought to. Well, that's my view. But that's the Christian. But see, we're theists, though. Theists, we have a reason for that, have moral grounding in that. So this is a philosophical issue. It is not a behavioral issue. That is to say, the argument is not predicated upon the assumption if I can just look at people's behavior and go, see, I told you atheism is false. But rather, it is a natural outflowing if you only believe that we are just evolved chimps on a speck of dust, and then it's my resources versus your resources, and I want your resources to be mine. I have every right as the survival of the fittest to kill everybody I've ever met ever if they get in the way of my resources. If you say you shouldn't do that, the answer is going to be, why not? The question would be, says who? You? Another evolved chimp? We're both nothing but evil. That's all we are in an atheistic worldview, naturalistic worldview. And that's the point. It's not that but it is also the point that the most amount of destruction and evils come by people who are very, very bright and they didn't have Christian mores. Another quick minor thing, which to me isn't that important for the reasons I just said, both for I don't think all atheists therefore murder everybody, nor do I think all Christians always do the right thing. That's predicated upon we just observe people's behavior and then work backwards. But rather we're talking about moral philosophy. But it is true, however, that you're mistaken that all wars and whatnot in the past were caused by, quote, religious people. That's like saying all people who did it were humans, therefore humans are evil. That is this. When you look for causation, you can't look for one similar feature and therefore say that's the cause of it. Just like with atheism, that's the point I've already made. You can't say just because an atheist did violence, atheism causes violence. No, it doesn't cause it. Back to moral philosophy, that is to say there's a restraint or no restraint, and that's the point.
Hop in this one in D tier. Oh, and on a side note, some of the loudest critics of these totalitarian communist regimes were other atheists, like Bertrand Russell, Victor Serge, and George freaking Orwell. Number 3. The fool says in his heart, there is no God.
To say that there is no God, the Bible says, makes one a fool. Only a fool would come to such a foolish Conclusion.
If you're engaging with an atheist debating God's existence or the validity of the Bible, and you actually want to have a productive conversation, don't resort to this line. Whether you believe it's true or not, it's not even an argument, one. It's an ad hominem attack, an insult. But it's basically the church equivalent of saying,
"You're just a woman with a small brain, with a brain a third the size of us. It's science."
sure, it comes from the Bible, but before you use this as your argument-ending trump card, perhaps you should first prove that the Bible's even reliable. I take it that that might even be the thing that you're arguing about with the atheist. I'm gonna put this one straight to F tier because it's intellectually lazy, it's not constructive, it's tribalistic, and it contributes to the demonization and ostracizing of atheists that we already get on the regular. And if you're a pastor and you say this, what is wrong with you? Perhaps you should get some new, more constructive material and try to actually build bridges rather than denigrating an entire group of people just so that you can smugly circle jerk the choir. I'm looking at you, John Hagee.
You fool!
You know, just for that, I'm gonna plop you over here in F tier, pumpkin.
Fool!
If you don't believe it.
Yeah, so my response to that is right, it comes from Scripture. So what are pastors thinking doing that? Well, to use the point you just made, which is because the average Christian pastor thinks the Scripture is authoritative. So when you said don't quote that to an atheist because I don't think it's authoritative, they don't trust in the Bible, and you held up the Bible, why would a pastor do that? For the reasons you just said, right? The implication is they do believe it's authoritative. I do completely agree that we should not have conversations with people saying, you're just a fool. But I agree. I agree. And in general, and most of the time, if we can keep our mouth shut, we also ought not be overwhelmingly condescending in videos and sarcastic and silly and make Christians look like they're a bunch of stupid idiots like you're doing in your video. And see, that's the problem with condemning ad hominem arguments, is that it always makes you a hypocrite, right, as soon as you fail. And so, which means you don't have the moral high ground. But of course, as an evolved chimp telling an evolved chimp, it won't matter what we believe anyway, so we don't catch the hypocrites all, it won't matter. But more it takes away the argument, the punch from your video if you do the very thing you're condemning other people of doing. The other thing I would say is that the preachers maybe you grew up in, and maybe they didn't explain it correctly. Of course, when the psalmist says that, the fool says in his heart there's no God, that from a biblical perspective, fool doesn't mean stupid idiot. The contrast, fool is a wise person. So it's like saying a person who has not ordered their lives according to God's way, that person is foolish. It doesn't mean they're low intellect. It's not about intelligence. It's not about education. It's about their capacity to order life the way God wants. That's what wisdom is. So from a biblical perspective, ancient Jews and Christians cared a whole lot about wisdom. Wisdom is, you see it all through Proverbs, of course, because that's what it is, a bunch of wisdom sayings. A lot about foolishness or fools versus the wise. You'll see it through the Psalms. You'll see it in Ecclesiastes and some other biblical texts. All that to say it's very important, but it doesn't mean is they're an idiot. So for an ancient Jew to say the fool says in his heart, there is no God, it's a way of saying, it's almost like defining the term. That's what a fool is. A person doesn't order their life the way God wants. But today in a modern English, if I say you're a fool, it means more like perhaps you're an imbecile, and that's not the biblical point, and that's why I don't use that term. I don't meet anybody and say, you're a fool. I agree with that part.
God, what's stopping you from murdering and raping whoever you want? This one is a little bit less on the nose, but like the last one, it betrays an underlying mistrust and hostile perception of atheists stemming from widespread societal denigration.
If you're an atheist,
I completely disagree. That's not where it comes from. Maybe for certain people, but when you say statements like this, that's where it comes from, you need evidence for that. I hold that view, and it's not because I am swayed by widespread denigration of atheists. I couldn't care less if every atheist I met behaved like Mother Teresa. On a philosophical level, it begs the question, what is the moral grounding to restrain yourself from murdering a person? That's a philosophical question, not predicated upon behavior, but I've already talked about it before.
you're basing your goodness and morality on what?
The universe couldn't conceivably care less whether you love your neighbor as yourself or torture them to death for fun. So you might as well do whatever you feel like doing with a little bit of time you've got.
Isn't it exhausting being that pessimistic? What a horribly bleak and cynical outlook to have about the entire world, to think that everyone around you is dying to rape and slaughter everyone around them.
I'm gonna have rape.
Yeah, that's, again, you missed, I guess that people might think that, but I think you completely missed the point. Certainly David Wood's point, who himself is a sociopath, or maybe psychopath. I think he calls himself psychopath. He was the guy who just talking, not this guy, the comedian, but the other guy. All that to say, the point is not that the average Christian philosopher looks around the world and thinks so pessimistically of the world, like they're all a bunch of murder, and they all want to murder. David Wood's point was not that either, which is it wasn't. The point is, what would stop you? Why not do it with the limited time you have?
for dinner.
But the only thing stopping them isn't God, it's a belief in God. Seems like a terrifyingly fragile safeguard. If belief in
Yeah, that's okay. Go. All right.
God really prevented rape and murder, then why do so many Christian denominations and nearly every religion have major clergy abuse scandals?
Yep,
Meanwhile,
major.
atheists make up 0.1% of the federal prison population. But I'll tell you why I don't rape and murder. Because I don't want to. I actually care about those around me, and I don't want to live in a place where atrocities are the norm, or where there's a high risk of that stuff happening to me or my loved ones. Oh, and you know what's a lot stronger of an incentive against crimes of this type than belief in God? The criminal justice system. This one gets D tier. It's all.
Yeah, this one's again. I don't want to belabor the point, but it's completely off topic. The point is not whether or not a person needs restraint from the outside or belief in God makes me not do it. The issue is moral grounding. Grounding is a term we use to define how the objective bottom or top of a moral value statement, whether I ought to do something or not. If it is not grounded in something outside of the subjective experience, then morality doesn't mean what morality means. It means a feeling or preference I have, no difference from my preference for vanilla ice cream over chocolate ice cream. When I say I ought to get chocolate because I like it, no one thinks you've made a moral statement. When I say I ought to protect that baby versus rape the baby, you have said a moral statement. And so I have a right to say you shouldn't rape that baby. I don't have the moral right to say you shouldn't eat that ice cream. They're very different categories, and it gets confusing in the American English language, I know. But that's the point they're making. It's not the point that every atheist that wants to go do it and you need to be put in prison or not prison. The issue is moral grounding.
Almost as bad as the last one, but it isn't purely hostile, and it could be a genuine, honest question, even if it's kind of a dumb one. You're going to hell, but
That's that kind of stuff there. That's unfortunate, man. There's so much literature written on this topic by very brilliant people. And for you to dismiss it like that demonstrates an overwhelming amount of ignorance. And I cannot get over how much on YouTube I'm demonstrating my overwhelming naivete as my children make clear to me often that I can't believe this kind of stuff is on the internet. You need to read more or go to school and learn that the moral philosophy is a gigantic field studied by atheists, Christians, Jews, Satan worshipers, I guess, around the globe, universities around the globe. It is not a dumb question. It's a very important question and is not an ad hominem attack. It's not. It's a moral philosophy issue.
I'll pray for you. Smug, self-righteous, and passive-aggressive, with a thin veneer of feigned compassion. It's literally the Christians interacting with atheist version of the Southern Church ladies' bless your heart.
Bless his heart.
First off,
Yeah, as a person from the South, that is not what bless your heart means in every circumstance. Sometimes people can say that way. It's like in the New York, I've been told if you're from New York and you say, forget about it, and forget about it means multiple things. Well, bless your heart typically means, oh, how sad. It doesn't mean they're an idiot, besides sometimes. But if you're not from the South, they think every time someone says that, it means you're an idiot, but it doesn't. But in any case, so your terms, it might mean that a person might say, you're going to hell, I'm going to pray for you. It might be all those things, that horrible, horrible things that think about you. It could be. It could also be they just really do hold that belief. If you're walking on the street and there's a pothole in front of you and you're on your cell phone, you don't see it, and I go, you're going to hit that, you're going to fall in the pothole. Well, I'm going to pray for you. Now listen to me. You horrible, stupid religious bigot. You're saying that because you think I'm a stupid. I mean, that would be, there's no way. I don't know you, but benefit of the doubt, Austin, that's not what you would do. If you were listening, you'd pull your hand away facing your phone and look at me and go, what are you talking about? You wouldn't start accusing me of attacking you. You might even thank me because there was a danger coming up and I tried to save you from it.
you realize that atheists.
But I agree that I don't have conversations with people if that's what's really bothering you. I would encourage Christians not to go into an atheist and going, you're going to hell, I pray for you. I concur with that. I don't think it's the best way to have a conversation with a person.
Don't believe in hell, right? So it's kind of a worthless threat. But it makes me wonder if
your disbelief in it doesn't make it worthless. I mean, what kind of do you really think the only things that exist are what you believe in? I mean, really? Stars don't exist unless you believe them? My dog doesn't exist if you believe my dog. I mean, come on now.
genuinely believe in a just and loving God, do you really believe that such a deity would create an eternal punishment for a finite crime?
Yes.
What exactly did I do to make you think that I deserve torture forever? Doubting?
That's a whole subject. I don't know of anything that you've done that would deserve that. Who cares what I think? I am not God. God cares very much about what you've done with your finite time. Yeah, and as a just, moral, perfectly righteous God, there's only one conceivable being who would have the moral right to decide justice, and it is God. And your belief or lack of belief is irrelevant to this existence. How you interpret references to Gehenna in the New Testament, the Greek, that's a whole other issue. I've done videos on Satan and hell before. That's a whole other issue. You don't have to believe it's eternal torture forever, but hell is absolutely a real state of being, as Jesus made very clear.
Asking questions, looking behind the curtain, gasp. Not that it really matters, I guess, because I've got you praying for me. How incredibly noble of you to talk God out of his perfect plan of burning me alive forever. Or are you just praying that I would conform to the straight and narrow path which you deem acceptable? Or perhaps this was just a conversation ender because you really don't give a crap about me. I'm popping this one in F tier, as in F you, Karen. Or perhaps I should say, bless your heart.
I'll be praying for you.
And I'll be praying you get nut cancer.
I don't have enough faith to be an atheist.
I would be an atheist too if I had that much faith.
Mark Lowry.
Well, hey, at least now we both agree that faith is a bad thing. There are some things that we all have to believe in faith.
I'll move on past this one because I don't care much about it. And yeah, I understand the point they're making. I actually don't want to care right now. I've talked so much about the definition of faith in other videos. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Here, it's not overtly insulting. It's just kind of ignorant about epistemology and science.
I also don't say that ever. I don't say I don't. There's a book, a well-known book by that title, and I get it. I just don't. I don't use that.
And came from monkeys. Why are there still monkeys?
Okay, so my question is, if we're from apes, why are the apes still here?
Okay, if you're a Christian, you should know that this one is kind of the stereotypical atheist example of terrible Christian arguments, and it's kind of the butt of a lot of jokes. But I actually don't think it's as bad of a question as a lot of people think. My first reaction is to either split technical hairs or to give the snarky atheist comeback of, well, if Americans came from England, why are there still English people? But I'm going to assume that this is an honest question stemming from a genuine misunderstanding of evolution and not just a religious gotcha. I think what's really being asked here is, if humans evolved superior survival traits compared to monkeys, isn't evolution about survival of the fittest? As one begins to dominate, wouldn't the...
Yeah, I don't even think that. I think most people just support, especially Christians, I think they're completely ignorant about normal, basic neo-Darwinian evolutionary theory. They really do think that we came from monkeys. And so I've taught many, many times Christians that's not what anybody thinks. In neo-Darwinian evolution, the view is that we came from a common ancestor. So monkeys, gorillas, chimps are more like a cousin on the family tree inside of neo-Darwinian evolution. So Christians, I agree, we shouldn't say this one.
On the topic. You just want to sin. You're going through a phase, or you're mad at God, but you'll be back in church in no time.
I like
the
picture of the like upset mom in the background. That was good.
They're into one category because they're incredibly presumptive, and it's super rude to assume someone's motives, reasons, and beliefs. And these are
I agree. I wouldn't do that in videos toward Christians, Austin, constantly. I agree.
Particularly ignorant because none of these are actual descriptions of atheists. An atheist is someone who doesn't believe in God, not someone who is mad at one. I might get mad at the harm caused by religion, but I can't be mad at a God I genuinely don't believe in.
Yeah, I hear you, buddy. That's just overwhelmingly naive. I mean, it's just overwhelming. They've done enormous research on this with atheists, particularly those atheists who talk about it to counselors and so forth. And all of atheists actually are very mad at a God they don't believe in. Even the thought of a God makes them angry. So that on a philosophical level, on a psychological level, that's not true at all. I'm gonna fast forward because a lot of atheists do sin, and they like sinning.
It's gay people now.
How do I know, David? Why would you say that such a thing? Because I've asked them. I was a high school teacher for a while, and I taught apologetics, and I asked a student there I knew was atheist. I had several atheists in my classes, and because I asked him, what do you believe, not believe, and so forth. And at the end of the whole semester, at the very end, I asked him, it was a one-on-one conversation, a little part of an oral exam, and he did a great job. He's a bright kid. So I asked the guy, I said, I'm just curious, where do you land now? Are you on your belief about God, not God, and so forth? Do you have more questions? He goes, no. I don't have more questions. You answered all in the class. I go, oh, really? Well, that's interesting. That's cool. Did you make any decision, or what do you think where are you on the journey, or something like that? And he said, oh, no, I couldn't become a Christian. And I said, oh, really? Why is that? He said, because I would have to give up too much. And he's one of multiple examples like that of people, in fact, are atheists for deliberate reasons because they want to sin.
Now? Oh, in this phase? has been going on for nearly a decade for me. I live every day with sincerity. I'm very happy with my life right now, and I have no reason to revert back. I would say D tier for this one, but many Christians do
Yeah, but if you're so happy, why? See, I've done therapy for 20 years, individual and couples. I would say if you're so happy, then why are you doing videos like this? If you're so happy, why do you just? This comes across as very petulant, like a little child would do this. They're mad at mom. There's a little deep anger inside of you need to get resolved by a therapist, perhaps. But this doesn't come across as happy and joyful. If you're things I really despised in my childhood or even later on in life, I mean, like I got out of a horrible jail or something, I don't go and reflect on it forever. I let it go. It's in my past. But that's me, though, and I like to let things go. But that makes me more happy than it is doing videos like this, trying to slam Christians.
actually know people who left the church because they were upset at God or the congregation or that they had some kind of incompatible lifestyle. It's just that, by definition, those aren't atheists. So I'm going to pop this one in C tier. And if you're a Christian using this one, I encourage you to expand your friend group and get to know some actual atheists.
By definition, that dumb. I mean, I don't. That's. Yeah, I don't really know what to say to that. It's true that atheism doesn't mean let's go sin. It's just by deductive reasoning and experience with people, most people who do in fact leave the church don't go join a convent. They don't go join, what's it called, Greenpeace. They don't do that. They go have rampant sex and drink and drugs and whatever. At least in my experience with people all the time. They don't leave the church to go be more abstinent and so forth. They go do then stereotypical sins where they can finally be in another group of people who don't, quote, make them feel guilty or judged.
Oh yeah, well, atheism is also a religion, but it's man-made. Like the faith one, almost every time I hear this, it's said as though religion is a bad thing. By religious people. Yeah,
I'm gonna fast forward on it because that's all. If people say it's ridiculous, atheism's not a religion. I've heard that Christians say that it's not a religion. It's not.
That annoying. I don't hear it too often. Wouldn't you rather believe just in case of hell? That's called Pascal's Wager. I did an entire video on it and its flaws, which I'll link to below, but here's a quick summary. First off, you realize it's not a binary choice of God or no God. There are countless thousands of possible gods. The odds of choosing the wrong one are enormous. What if by doing so, you piss off the right one? Well, the sincere I don't know of an atheist.
Yeah, sorry, bud. You just completely committed a category error. The belief that there's God or no God is in fact binary. This is the law of excluded middle on logical principles. So yes, it is true. There's either no God or God. Those can't be both true simultaneously. And then you change the subject to say, well, what if you choose the wrong God? That's a totally different issue. So I hope you cover that in your video because what you just said is fallacious.
Atheists would be far less likely to upset her. Furthermore, most of the gods that we know of are obviously man-made. We know that hell is man-made. I did a video on that too.
Well, if you had a video, then obviously we know it's man-made. I mean, how? What scientific apparatus did you use to come to that conclusion? I mean, which laboratory did you rent? Did you build a laboratory? Did you publish this in scientific journals, how we know for a fact? Because the only thing that really tells us reality is scientific skepticism, you told us. So where is it? Where's the evidence? That should be in your video. You should absolutely, that would genuinely create quite the buzz and viral. I have scientific proof that hell is not real.
And this commitment is not without cost. In addition to the horrible and harmful ideas perpetuated because of religion, how many people view this life or planet as a transient or temporary?
Isn't that funny? It's such a horrible thing, and it showed a sign that abortion was murder. So preserving innocent human baby life is a horrible thing that those stupid religious people do. Come on, man. And who are you to tell people it's horrible? You're just an evolved chimp. You're just a monkey. Who are you? I mean, says who? These aren't horrible. You might disagree with them. Maybe they don't, or they're not as compassionate as you want them to be. But these aren't, you have no moral right to say they're horrible. I mean, that word horrible doesn't mean anything besides I don't like it. Well, you don't have to like it, but that's not a moral statement in your worldview.
Trial run for the life to come, potentially resulting in huge missed opportunities. And think of how much time and money people spend on religions, which would be a waste that could be better used elsewhere if they turn out to be wrong. And that's all.
See, better use. You keep using moral statements, and yet you've rejected the very ground of moral ontology.
all the more costly a sacrifice if time is short and this life is all you got. And finally, we can't choose to believe something that we don't believe. We can lie and say that we do, but a God would see right through us. Why not just be honest? Even though this one is based in bad logic, it often comes from a place of genuine concern, so I'm gonna give it an A tier, but it's a bad argument. Maybe B tier. Before I get to the last one here,
it's not really an argument. It is it's a rational justification or a warrant for something that a person could say. I'm not sure if your video, Pascals Wager, said that. I don't believe in Christianity or a God because I want to bet just in case, but a person is warranted to do so if that's what they wish to do.
There are a few honorable mentions. So you worship Satan, right? Clearly, you're an atheist, but you're so nice. What, do you expect me to eat a baby? Have you heard about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ? Oh my God, no, tell me all about it. Psych, everyone's heard. It's not exactly a secret. If you don't believe in God, what's stopping you from just ending your life?
He said psych? I haven't heard that in a long time. That's good.
Believe it or not, just because something means everything to you doesn't mean that it has one iota of importance to the rest of us. But then again, reality is to die for. You sure do talk about God a lot for someone who doesn't believe in him. Well, first off, Christians don't have exclusive rights to explore these topics, and doing exactly that is kind of my job. Off camera, I talk about all sorts of other stuff like time travel, The Witcher, Zelda, Rick and Morty, the zombie apocalypse, the release date of Half-Life 3, and I don't believe that any of those things are real. But then again, unlike those things, religion shapes people's choices in a unique way. It affects everyone's life and plays a disturbingly large role in politics. So naturally, I'm gonna push back a little. You were never a true...
See, I not to belabor the point, but I will belabor it. Everything you just said assumes a moral high ground. Says who? Why are you trying so hard to convince the rest of us that you're right and that we're wrong? That our ways, maybe people want to beat people and beat their wives. Maybe they want to kill babies. Maybe they want to serve other people and serve the homeless. Who are you to tell anybody what they can and cannot, what they should and should not do? This moral outrage you experience, it just seems, well, vacuous. On your worldview, there's no reason to feel the outrage.
Christian. This one is actually one of the most frustrating because to most people saying this, I guarantee you I was more of a Christian than you were. Dedicated as a baby in church, raised on the mission field, baptized at 7, never missed a church service, had quiet time and devotions every morning. I literally studied Greek in elementary school to get a better understanding of the Bible. I memorized the entire Sermon on the Mount by the time I was 10, had monthly prayer and worship, potlucks, and annual missions conferences. I was raised on ABEC and Bob Jones Christian homeschool material, as well as focus on the family propaganda. I accepted Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior, genuinely believed it with all of my heart, and had the same Holy Spirit experiences as other Christians. Of my own volition, I attended a private Christian university for my freshman year where I had chapel every morning, group devotions, and also took a biblical studies course. I joined a Christian fraternity and was a church camp counselor for 2 summers and a youth pastor and a worship leader for 1. I learned guitar in order to play worship songs, and I wrote my own songs and poems to God. Finally, I did a semester mission trip in Kazakhstan before slowly realizing that everything that I knew about the Bible and God was wrong. I value my integrity, and I wanted to go where the truth led.
That's a lot, and that's so sad. I think you said Bob Jones. I think I understood that. Yeah, so that's just one of every example I've ever met ever so far, and I'm limited, I'm not omniscient, but every single person who's left the faith grew up a fundamentalist. Everyone I've ever met so far, and here's another example of that so far. Fundamentalism has caused such damage to people. They force these constant binaries, all or nothing, and if you don't interpret the Bible their way, you're not a Christian, and they're forced to believe that constantly, probably obviously like from childhood. And so when you start, instead of having nuance or reading with the genre and so forth, it's all or nothing, and then you're forced to choose. All right, well then I've got to go. I mean, the studies prove that. I've seen at least 3 independent studies done of people who left the faith after high school and they go to college. All 3 demonstrate roughly the same number. 7 out of 10 don't go back to church within the first, I think it's 10 years. And of those 10 years, roughly 3 to 4 of the 7 go back. That's roughly 3 to 4 out of 10 children grow up in church, will never step foot in it again. They can still be disciples of Jesus, even if they don't go to church and so forth. But the fact they never go back implies they probably have nothing to do with Jesus either. And then the top 2 reasons why they do this are, 1, they thought they were forced to choose between what we call a scientific worldview versus the Bible, like this guy has already alluded to early on. Or 2, the second major issue for them is what we call pluralism. They meet other faiths, Hindus and atheists and so forth, and they go, they're nice, and I don't want to tell them they're going to hell, which again is bizarre because apparently they were taught as children, your job is to tell people they're going to hell. That's a very, very bad lesson to teach a child, because at no point are we ever told to tell anybody that they're going to hell. I mean, that's so sad. But those two are the top two reasons why. And so here is another example of a very, very sad loss. Very, very unfortunate, sad loss. And on the point he made is that you never were a Christian in the first place. I know many, many Christians have said that. That's usually the go-to message. My own view is that Christians are wrong when they say that, because several reasons. One is because I don't know how a Christian can tell another person that they were never a Christian. How would you possibly know that? And they're going to say, well, I know by implication, David, because now they say they're not. And this is a long topic, but that comes from a particular view in the Reformation by a guy named Jean Calvin, a French lawyer, John Calvin, and others like him, who argued that God selects people before they're ever born and preordains for them to choose him or not choose him. They're all going to go to hell because he's preordained they're going to sin, and therefore does their punishment go to hell. And he's hand-selected a handful that he will just say, you're mine, you're saved. And so salvation isn't up to you. And so if a person ever says, I'm not a Christian, it has to be the case that you never elect in the first place. That's also very, very problematic for Christian people who believe that. And that's a whole other issue too. But all that to say, I agree with, if his name is Austin here, that I don't use that either with people. One is because I don't know how they could know it. Two, I think theologically and biblically there's not grounds for doing that. Three, there's positive biblical reasons for arguing that people can be a disciple of Jesus and then abandon him. It's called apostasis in Greek. Apostasy is where we get it from. It's all through the New Testament. So I have three main reasons why I don't say what he just said Christians say to him.
So, as hard as it was, I left my faith. It was the honest thing to do. I genuinely believed then, and I genuinely don't now. Is the thought that people like me exist so threatening to your fragile faith that you can't accept that I'm real?
No, I actually do appreciate honesty, because I'm a Christian, though. See, honesty is in the moral character of God, so I actually value honesty. As an atheist, I have no idea why you would value that, unless you say, well, I want people to tell me the truth because I don't like being lied to. Why? Well, it helps me survive. Oh, it's not because it's a moral good. It just means you don't want to be duped, so you survive longer, I guess. I'm not sure that morality will work out whatsoever. But I do value being honest, and twice in my life when I intellectually left the faith, I also kept thinking, at minimum, I want to have integrity, at least want to believe it. I really do want to believe this stuff, and if I don't, then I'm going to let it go. That's a very difficult, dark thing to do when you have a whole childhood experience. It can be very difficult. So I appreciate the desire to be honest with yourself. It's just so unfortunate that you came to this conclusion, because it was unnecessary.
Particular statement is frustratingly invalidating and extremely presumptive.
Frustrating and validating. See, that's me. That's probably need to get counseling for that. Who cares what others think, right? Who cares what other monkeys think? If other monkeys think that you're wrong, let them think they're wrong. What difference does it make if they don't validate your experience? I don't really mean that. Why do you care so much? So in counseling, we'd say it's obvious that you need their affirmation, you need their validation. I would, from a virtual place on the other side of a screen, I'd go so far to say that what you're really mad about is a mom or dad or a family that rejected you and your disbelief, and so that feels very infuriating because you feel like you don't exist anymore. And that sounds like when transgenders say, you don't think I even exist. Well, no, most people aren't solipsists. We really do think other people exist. But I understand the frustration of being getting validated. I get that. I'm saying from your perspective, why is it that you need their validation so much? I don't need your validation. That's not frustrating to me at all that you think I believe in nonsense. I'm convinced I don't believe in nonsense, and I don't care if you don't like that. I don't need your approval. That's not how truth works, and certainly not my emotional state. And that's another little thing that's ironic. Throughout this video, you criticize Christians often for being so fragile. They're just so fragile. But in reality, this sounds like a lot of projection on your part, that you seem very, very fragile and very upset. So I do hope if this is you and you're watching this, not you, Austin, I'm sure you'll watch this video, but if someone else, if you're watching this video and you find yourself just so upset all the time, I encourage you to explore that with a therapist, Christian or not Christian, and just kind of figure out what's going on. You probably have some wounds that need some healing. I really meant as a form of encouragement. Nothing I've said is sarcastic. I really mean that, because I even care about the atheist. I care about everybody. That if you find yourself that worked up about this subject, it's worth reflecting. I know I have, and it's worth the time.
You don't know me and my journey. After all the years of my life, the literal blood, sweat, tears, times, and prayers that I poured wholeheartedly into my faith, you don't have the right to revoke my ex-Christian card. But you do have the right to join John Hagee over here in F tier. A fate worse than hell, it sucks to be you.
You fool!
Now look, we all say dumb things sometimes. Atheists spout dumb stuff too, all the time. Maybe I should make a tier list video about that too. But like I said, my goal isn't to mock Christians. I'm just done hearing these god-awful arguments, and often prejudice-perpetuating misconceptions, which I propose should all go the way of the dodo.
Those are my quick thoughts on that. Yeah, I won't do a video on dumb things atheists say. I won't. YouTube is full of them, and that just would be, to me, I guess kind of funny depending how you did it, but also just demeaning. Let me know your thoughts below. Perhaps you've heard things Christians say. Maybe you are one of those Christians who say these things and go, does this make sense, or is this the best way to do it? I'm happy to give my opinion on it, but it's just my opinion. Otherwise, God bless you, and I hope to see you next time.